Hello, lovely viewers. You are most welcome to our channel Poetry Online. In this video, we shall be discussing the summary, detailed analysis, themes, and literary devices of the poem On His Blindness by John Milton. Kindly subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to get updates on all our new videos. Once again, let us assure you of a very interesting discussion. Get ready for this lesson. John Milton was born on December 9, 1908 in London, England. He came from a middle-class family and went to school at Christ College, Cambridge, where he originally intended to enter the clergy. After leaving university, he changed his plans and spent the next year studying independently for a career as a poet. During the years of the English Civil War, John Milton worked under Oliver Cromwell to create pamphlets advocating for religious freedom, divorce, and press freedom. He also served in Cromwell's government as Secretary for Foreign Languages. It was in 1651 to 1652 that John Milton became completely or totally blind. Milton was arrested in 1660 after Charles II came to the throne and lived out the rest of his life in the country, secluded from the world, working on his epic poem, Paradise Lost. This poem will serve as his legacy and be considered among the greatest poems ever written. In 1674, in Buckinghamshire, England, Milton died shortly after finishing Paradise Regained and Samson Agonistes. On His Blindness by John Milton is a Petrarchan sonnet. The octave presents the problem of the poet. He is worried. And why is he worried? Or what is the cause of his worry? His worry is caused by his blindness. He laments that he is not able to use his God-given talent to serve God. His ardent desire to serve God by praising Him through his verses is not fulfilled because he cannot use his eyesight. He fears that God will refuse or chide him for not fully tapping into his full potentials when he was alive. Thus, when he dies, God is going to rebuke him for not fully tapping into his full potentials when he was alive. His problem is solved in the sestet. He realizes that God does not expect anything from his children. God controls the whole world, and that humans cannot serve God as he wishes. He consoles himself, saying that the one who bears the burden and waits for his turn to be blessed by God is equally serving God. It is important to note that John Milton began to lose his sense of sight in 1644, but went completely or totally blind around 1650. It was around this time, when the poet was completely blind, that he wrote his poem On His Blindness, or When I Consider How My Light is Spent. On His Blindness, also known by its first line, When I Consider How My Light is Spent, is the 19th sonnet of John Milton. This poem is an Italian or Petrarchan sonnet. What then is a sonnet? A sonnet is a 14-line poem written in iambic pentameter. A Petrarchan sonnet is divided into two: an octave, that is the first 8 lines of the poem, and a sestet, the last 6 lines. So, when we put the first 8 lines and the last 6 lines together, we're going to get 14 lines, which will make up a complete sonnet. Let's take our first reading of the poem. When I consider how my light is spent, ere half my days in this dark world and wide, and that one talent, which is deaf to hide, lodged me useless, though my soul, more bent to serve there with my Maker, and present my true account, less a returning charge, that God exact day labor, light denied, I fondly ask, but patience, to prevent that murmur, soon replies, God doth not need either man's work or his own gifts. Who best bear his mild yoke, they serve him best. His state is kingly, thousands at his beating speed, and post over land and ocean without rest. They also serve who only stand and wait. This poem has a rhyme scheme ABBA, ABBA, CDE, CDE. It is autobiographical and religious in nature as it discusses the poet's own deep personal sorrow, thus, his blindness, and how he finally decided to accept his fate with calm resignation without further questioning or challenging his maker. This poem is autobiographical because it is all about the poet's feeling and emotions on becoming blind. It is also religious because the poem tells us about John Milton's religious views on his blindness as one of the best known poetry and very significant sonnet written by John Milton. This is an intensely personal poem which has a reference to his blindness which left him completely dejected and depressed. It is a Petrarchan sonnet and it is divided into two. As we said earlier, the first part is the octave and the second part is a sestet. The sonnet, although it begins on a sad note, ends up with hope, satisfaction, and a firm belief in God's will. John Milton was a deeply religious poet and he wanted to write great poems to praise his maker. The blindness, which crept upon him at the age of 43, shattered his dreams of writing great poems, and John Milton becomes very devastated at the loss of his eyesight. He begins the sonnet with an expression of profound sense of loss. He expresses the fear that half of his life, which is considered his life, is already spent, and now his world is going to become dark due to the loss of his eyesight. John Milton was a poetic genius, and he considers that he is not able to make the best use of his God given talent because of the loss of his eyesight. He feels very sad that hiding this God's gift is similar to burying it and causing the death of his talent. John Milton feels guilty that, due to the loss of his eyesight, he is not able to write poems to praise his maker or to praise God. He thinks that, on the day of judgment, God might perhaps chide him for wasting his God given talent. In a moment of anxiety, John Milton questions himself whether God will demand the same amount of labor from a blind man as he will expect from any other normal person. John Milton becomes very sad at the thought of God expecting as much labor from a blind man as from those blessed with their eyesight. But when he reconsiders this fact and slowly tries to analyze, he is able to understand the fact that God actually does not require any such labor. Patience, which is personified in this poem, tells him that God does not need either man's work or his gifts. Who bear his mild yoke, they serve him best. John Milton is thus convinced that God does not need man's work or his own gifts. The best gift one can give back to God is to bear his mild yoke. God's splendor is that of a king, and there are thousands of angels who obey his commands and will always be ready to work over lands and oceans without rest. Milton concludes his sonnet on his blindness with a great satisfaction that even those people who stand and wait to receive God's commands equally serve God. Thus, according to John Milton, those who patiently wait to receive God's commands also render him their genuine service, similar to those who do their services. The octave of the poem opens this sorrowful yet interesting poem and introduces readers to the subject matter. This octave poses a serious question which heightens the sorrow, emotions, and pathos of the poem. The sestet, on the other hand, provides an answer to the poet's puzzling and complicated question. This reply he gets from Patience stresses the greatness and wisdom of God. One interesting thing about this poem is that, in the first 8 lines of the octave, John Milton himself is a central character. He expresses his deep personal sorrow, using the first person point of view to effectively and efficiently convey his message. We come across pronouns like I, me, and my, which stresses on how personal the message of the poem is to the poet. The sestet, on the other hand, is told from the third person point of view. Here, the Maker or God is the central character being described by patience. We come across pronouns and nouns like him, his, and God. The sestet answers the question of the poet while depicting the power, greatness, and wisdom of God. Let's now consider the diction of the poet. Diction is a writer's unique style of expression, especially his or her choice and arrangement of words. The language of this poem on his blindness is simple and straightforward, with a few archaic words which may pose as a challenge for modern readers. This poem is highly biblical in the use of phrases like his gifts, talents, mild yoke, kingly. From our ongoing discussion, it is clear from all indication that this poem is about the poet himself. As someone who became blind at an early age, it is appropriate for him to use the phrase half my life in the poem, as he truly spent half of his life in total darkness. The poet explains that, due to his blindness, the whole world is dark and gloomy. He further spoke about the gifts of writing, which was freely given to him by God. This God given talent, even though he will continue to live with the poet till he dies, is considered useless as the poet cannot effectively use his creative power since he has lost his eyesight. John Milton, as a result of his blindness, becomes more submissive and religious. He dedicates his gifts and creative power to praising and worshiping God and His words so as to win God's favor on the day of judgment. In this poem, he raises a genuine complaint about his blindness and questions God to that effect. The poet bravely resolves or finds an answer to this question as the voice of God or the voice of wisdom, which is personified by patience, tells him to be patient as God does not want anything from man. The voice of wisdom gives him reasons upon reasons to substantiate the assertion that God does not need anything from man, or God does not need man's work or his gifts. We are told that in God's kingdom or in heaven, there are thousands of angels waiting to be commanded by God. These angels, we are told, are ready to act on God's commandment anytime, anywhere. They carry out God's commandment both on land and on the sea without resting or without any iota of tiredness. The voice of wisdom equally informs us that these angels serve God better, as mere mortals cannot work with the speed and efficiency of angels. The poet concludes the poem by a very emphatic statement to people all over the world, especially those who have been either physically challenged in a way or rendered disabled by fate. He says that those who are not able to serve God through their gifts or through their God given talent should simply stand in service of God and wait for their chance to receive God's mercies. Let's now take our second reading of the poem. When I consider how my light is spent, ere half my days in this dark world and wide, and that one talent, which is deaf to hide, lodged me useless, though my soul, more bent to serve there with my Maker, and present my true account, lest a returning child, that God exact day labor, light denied, I fondly ask, but patience, to prevent that mama, soon replies, God does not need either man's work or his own gifts. Who best bear his mild yoke, they serve him best. His state is kingly, thousands at his beating speed, and post over land and ocean without rest. They also serve who only stand and wait. After reading the poem for the second time, let's take a detailed analysis of the lines contained in the poem. When I consider how my light is spent, ere half my days in this dark world and wide. The poem opens with a metaphor. When I consider how my light is spent, eyesight in this line is compared to life. Also, light can simply mean life. The poet bemoans his blindness and the fact that he has to live the rest of his life in total darkness. According to him, he often thinks that half of his life, or sight, or intelligence, or his God given talent has been spent in serving humanity. But now that he has lost his eyesight, he is going to use the rest of his life, which is now dark, to serve and worship God, as the rest of his life has become dark and more challenging. Disability can come as a shocker to everyone, living a normal life, and then, one day, one cannot do the things one does with ease. In the case of our poet, he loses his sense of sight. The eye is considered as the door to the body. This is because losing one's eyesight means a total change in the life of the person. The poet begins with the speaker's consideration of how he has spent the years of his life, represented as light in the poem, in contrast to what his life has become as a result of his blindness. This light is a literal representation of Milton's own life, or the days in which he could see. The second line expands on that, explaining that even before half of the speaker's life had been passed, he is forced to live in a world that is dark and wide. And that's one talent, which is there to hide, lodged with me useless, though my soul more bent. These lines talk about the gifts of writing, which was freely given to the speaker by God. This gift, even though will continue to live with him till he dies, is considered useless, as the poet cannot effectively use his creativity since he has lost his eyesight. The talent of writing, which he had, is useless now because, without eyesight, he cannot read and write. Thus, it is just a load from God that he has bestowed on him. The poet laments over the loss of his eyesight and wonders what his talent means for him now, as without eyesight, he cannot use it. Milton compares his blindness to death. It is death to Milton to have hidden his talent beneath his blindness. The next lines begin to speak to Milton's devotion to God. He explains that his talent, which are still hidden, even though his soul is more bent to serve God. This poem is a sonnet which deals with the poet's agony and frustration of his blindness, and the poet also complains that he is now not able to see and appreciate the beauty and glory of the Almighty God. The poet in the opening lines of the poem thinks that he will not be able to serve God as his visual power is gone. The poet in these lines makes a biblical allusion to the parable of the talents and compares it to a situation. The parable of the talents begins with a master entrusting talents to his servants before setting out on a long journey. One servant receives 5 talents, another receives 3 talents, and the final is granted just 1 talent. Although today's scholars express some disagreement as to the exact meaning of talent in the parable, all of them agree that the talent must be of significant worth, thus, valuable gold or silver, for example. Upon returning home, the master learns that the first and second servants used their talent to significantly increase the value of the property they were granted. They were rewarded accordingly. The third servant, however, buried his talent and did not enjoy the gains of his predecessors. When called upon to account for his behavior, he claims that fear prevented him from investing his talent. The master reprimands the third servant for being lazy and casts him out. What it simply means is that the speaker compares his creative power to burying the talent, which led to the servant being reprimanded by his master. Thus, in the end, the master reprimanded the third servant for being lazy and cast him out of his kingdom. So, John Milton doesn't want his creator to reprimand him for being lazy or to cast him out of his kingdom on the day of judgment. Hence, he wants to use his creative power, or he has a burning desire to use his creative power to impress or win the favor of God. To serve there with my Maker and present my true account, lest he return in charge. These lines continue to speak about John Milton's devotion to God. He explains that even though his talent is hidden, he will do everything in his ability to worship and praise God through his creative works or through his creative power. The speaker also hints readers on the second coming of Jesus. He tells us that in order not to incur the wrath of God when he returns, he will use his creativity or his creative power or his God given talent to the fullest, or he will tap into his full potentials despite his disability or despite his blindness. He does not want God to chide him for hiding under the guise of blindness and not using his gifts to serve him. What it simply means is that we should all take advantage of the gifts we have been given, irrespective of any challenges, limitations, or obstacles we are faced with. Doth God exact day labor, light denied? I fondly ask, but patience to prevent. At this point in the poem, John Milton asks a serious question, which ends the first part of the poem. The poet wonders if God expects as much work from him as he expects from people without any disability, limitation, or obstacles in life. It is the finishing sentence or the concluding sentence that he began at the beginning of the poem with the word when. He asks, does God require those without light to labor? He wants to know whether when he cannot continue to work due to his blindness, will God still require work from him? In these lines, the lament of the poet turns into desire and wonder. He says that he desires to serve his Maker, but because of his blindness, he cannot do so efficiently and effectively. He wonders if God still wants him to serve him, in spite of the fact that his eyesight is no more. Here again, patience is personified as it is presented with human qualities of speaking or advising the speaker. Patience is depicted as the voice of wisdom and replies to the speaker's question. That's Mama soon replies, God doth not need either man's work or his own gifts. Who best? John Milton continues, invoking the personification of patience in these lines. Patience appears as a pacifying force to prevent that mama or to prevent the poet from being ungrateful to God just because he has made him blind. Thus, there are so many things to be grateful for. So, patience wants to prevent that mama or wants to prevent that ungratefulness from coming out. The mama, which represents the poet's complaints, frustration, and dissatisfaction with his current state of blindness, is prevented from showing by patience. Patience replies to the speaker's internal question. Patience explains that God does not need special gifts or works from man, such as Milton's writing or his creative power, but God loves those who bear his mild yoke. What it simply means is that God loves those who give over their lives to him and accept that he is in control of their fate. That is, what God requires from man is not his gifts or his works. The message here is that the people who accept God and his decisions willingly and cheerfully, they are the best servants to God and not necessarily those with talents, gifts, and other materialistic things. Bear his mild yoke, they serve him best. His state is kingly, thousands at his bidding speech. This voice of wisdom gives reasons upon reasons to substantiate the assertion that God does not need man's work or his gifts. We are told that in God's kingdom or in heaven, there are thousands of angels waiting to be commanded by God. These angels, we are told, are ready to act on God's commandment anytime, anywhere. God has many angels to serve him. Man and his works are nothing or not enough in the sight of God. Only those who stand and wait patiently, those who bear their problems without murmuring or complaining, or without showing any iota of dissatisfaction or ingratitude are those who serve God the best. What it simply means is that the works of man does not please God in any way, but those who bear their mild yoke, that is, those who remain patiently content with what he has given them or what he has destined for them, as most liked by God. And post of a land and ocean without rest, they also serve who only stand and wait. The post in this line means to move quickly over land and ocean without pausing for rest. These angels have supernatural abilities and are created purposely to serve God. They carry out God's commandments both on land and on the sea or the ocean without resting or any iota of tiredness. The voice of wisdom equally informs us that these angels serve God better, as mere mortals cannot work with the speed and efficiency of angels. The point ends with the answer to the speaker's question that those who cannot rush over land and ocean, like Milton, also serve God. The poet concludes the poem with a very emphatic statement to people all over the world, especially those who have either been physically challenged in a way or rendered disabled by fate, to know that they equally serve God as others do. God has a huge kingdom, and there are thousands of angels who remain in motion to carry out God's orders and commands. They never take rest. The poet compares them with those who have talents, gifts, and creative power and use it to serve God. On the other hand, there are some other angels who also serve God just by standing and waiting before God. According to him, their service is equally valuable to God as that of the first category of angels. The poet compares himself with the latter angels who patiently stand by God. Thus, in the end, the poet is quite satisfied as he is also serving just by keeping patient. That is, those who give over their lives to God and accept that he is in control of their fate are equally serving him. The major themes of this poem include the supremacy of God, total acceptance and faith in God. God is in control of everything. The best servants of God are the people who accept his decisions willingly and cheerfully. Let's now consider some of the literary devices used in John Milton's On His Blindness. Metaphor. When I consider how my light is spent, here, eyesight is compared to light, or life is compared to light. And that's one talent which is there to hide. Here, losing the speaker's eyesight is compared to death. Bear his mild yoke. That is, yoke in this line means suffering. Personification. Lodged with me useless. Thus, talent is personified as occupying space. But patience, to prevent that murmur, soon replies. Here again, patience is personified with human qualities of replying to a question. Alliteration. Days in this dark world and wide. The repetition of the D sound in day and dark and the W sound in world and wide. My maker. The repetition of the sound in mine and maker. Day labor light. The repetition of the L sound in labor and light. Patience to prevent. The repetition of the P sound in patience and prevent. Synecdoche. Light in this poem stands for eyesight or vision, or it stands for life. Thanks for watching this video. Please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share this video.